The knock didn't sound human. It was more like a battering ram against pine. I opened the cabin door half-dressed, coffee still steaming in my hand, and there she was, Karen Stanford, president of the Ridgepine Woods HOA, standing in my forest clearing like she owned the damn mountain. Her lipstick was smeared, her clipboard trembling with self-righteous fury, and behind her were 3 men in polo shirts carrying a measuring wheel, a camera, and what looked like a folder thick enough to break a window. "Mr. Dawes," she said in a voice drenched in sugar and spite, "you are in gross violation of 26 Ridgepine ordinances. You've built an unsanctioned secondary dwelling unit, this cabin in a protected HOA region. Effective immediately, you owe the Ridgepine Association $90,000. Payable within 60 days or face legal action." I blinked. Once, twice, then I laughed. Not a little chuckle. A full belly laugh that startled the squirrels. "Karen," I said slowly, sipping my coffee, "this isn't Ridgepine territory. It never was. This land has been in my family since 1932. I've got the deed, the title, and the original survey map to prove it. You're trespassing." She stepped closer. "That's where you're mistaken. We expanded jurisdiction last year. Section G was absorbed during our April resolution. You didn't attend the meeting, so your property defaulted to compliance. Now I'm a combat veteran. I've dealt with smugglers in Yemen and smug lieutenants in Virginia, but I've never met a more deluded tyrant than a suburban woman with a clipboard. Karen wasn't just wrong, she was dangerous. And I knew then and there she wasn't bluffing. Her little goon squad wasn't just gathering photos for fun. They were building a legal noose, hoping I'd hang myself with my own silence. I slammed the door, but I didn't let it go. I called my attorney May Wong, a pit bull in a power suit who'd fought zoning boards and corporate land grabs from Oregon to D.C. May reviewed the claim and whistled. "They're trying to frame you under a fabricated annexation policy. That's fraud if we prove intent. And with this much overreach, we might have a RICO case." I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But Karen had dropped a legal bomb on my doorstep, and now she was parading around the community bulletin as if I were a criminal. Next week, I got my own notice-certified envelope, big red stamp. Lien issued. They were dead serious. Karen had gone full dictator, even printing flyers with my face captioned "violator," and distributing them to the hiking club, HOA members, and, unbelievably, the mail carrier. I lost a forestry grant and 2 clients from my eco-consulting business because of her campaign. Then came the cherry on top. She locked the forest road gate. My own family had to hike through snow to visit me at Christmas because Karen filed an unauthorized vehicle claim against anyone who used the gravel road which I maintained with my own equipment. I lost it. May filed suit within 48 hours. Not just to challenge the fines, but to open a full-blown federal case. Property theft, fraudulent liens, mail harassment, and misuse of public trust funds. I'd done some digging literally and legally and found that Karen had siphoned nearly $19,000 from HOA reserve accounts to pay for private investigations against homeowners who refused to comply. The day we walked into court, she was there in her royal blue dress suit, grinning like a queen at a coronation. Her lawyer, Todd Belsky, looked like he'd stepped out of a budget shampoo commercial, cheap, shiny, and doomed. The judge raised an eyebrow after reading the preliminary filing. "Ms. Stanford, are you aware that Mr. Dawes' property was never legally included in your association?" Karen blinked. "Your Honor, Ridgepine expanded under Article 7, which grants the board sovereign zoning rights." The courtroom laughed. Judge Mathers did not. He leaned forward, eyes steel cold. "Article 7 does not override state land records. And you've levied a $90,000 fine without basis, falsified jurisdiction maps, and used community funds for personal enforcement. That's not mismanagement. That's criminal fraud." Karen's face went pale. But it wasn't over. May stood, calm and fierce, holding up a drone photo. "Your Honor, here's a document timestamped 3 weeks before the supposed annexation vote, showing Ms. Stanford holding a mock planning session on Mr. Dawes' property. That, combined with her flyers and targeted harassment, confirms intent." It was like watching a balloon deflate in slow motion. Karen stood up, shouted something about civic duty, then sat back down when the bailiff moved. Judge Mathers didn't just dismiss the lien. He ordered the Ridgepine Board to pay $112,000 in damages, $40K for lost income, $30,000 in emotional harm, and the rest for legal fees. And then he turned to Karen and Todd and said something I'll never forget. This court will forward evidence to the district attorney's office for prosecution of criminal misconduct. Miss Stanford, pending review, you may be held personally liable. Your snack fund's about to get a lot less cozy. She gasped. But I am a community leader. The judge stared. You're a felon in progress. Karen didn't walk out of the courtroom. She staggered, face blotchy. Hair frizzed at the crown like it had given up trying to help her look respectable. Behind her, Todd was on the phone, whispering so fast he nearly tripped over his own briefcase. May and I just stood there, still as trees, watching the storm we'd survived finally clear. I remember May leaning over and whispering, "That's not the end, John. That's just the toppling of the first domino." And she was right. The court's ruling sparked something we hadn't anticipated: a full-scale audit of Ridgepine Woods' HOA. By the time the district attorney's office dug through the ledgers, they uncovered 5 years of shady transactions, personal reimbursements disguised as community infrastructure upgrades, and over $200,000 spent on private security to monitor dissenting homeowners. Turns out I wasn't the first target. I was just the first to fight back loud enough. Karen wasn't just a vindictive neighbor, she was a petty tyrant with a checkbook and no oversight. She'd manipulated elderly residents into paying fraudulent fees, threatened new couples with foreclosure if they painted their doors non-neutral colors, and even installed cameras facing a veteran's backyard because his service dog barked too much. The man, Miguel, showed up at the next public hearing and cried while holding his discharge papers. Karen had labeled him a community nuisance in an internal memo. I never knew that part until it aired on the local news, and suddenly, everything we'd suffered became part of a much bigger reckoning. It wasn't just Karen who fell. 3 board members resigned within the week. 2 were indicted. And Todd? That greasy windbag of a lawyer? Turns out he was billing the HOA twice for the same hours and had forged signatures on complaint forms. The public backlash was unlike anything I'd seen. Within a month, Ridgepine homeowners filed a class action suit. May helped organize it. And for the first time, the very people Karen thought she controlled, the retirees, the teachers, the young families afraid to speak, stood together and demanded justice. But the moment that hit me the hardest wasn't the trial. It wasn't even when Karen was let out in handcuffs 3 weeks later, wearing a sour expression and no lipstick for the first time in years. It was the letter I got from a woman named Rachel. She lived 4 streets over from Ridgepine, outside HOA reach, but had watched it all unfold online. She'd inherited her mother's cabin 10 years ago, but never dared to renovate it. "Too many HOA Karens around here," she wrote. "But after watching what you did, I finally installed the porch swing she always wanted. I'm not afraid anymore." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It's strange what fear does. How it silences, shrinks. How it makes people accept fines they never owed, rules they never voted for, threats they never deserved. And it's even stranger what resistance does, how one pushback, one lawsuit, one stand in the courtroom can crack open the silence and let sunlight in. The judge's sentencing came on a Monday. Karen Stanford was sentenced to 6 years in state prison for fraud, abuse of authority, and conspiracy to commit property theft. Todd Belsky was disbarred and now sells used office chairs in a strip mall, or so I've heard. The HOA was placed under federal oversight until a full reorganization. And the snack budget, that ridiculous line item that Karen once used to stock the clubhouse fridge with imported chocolate and sugar-free wine, was dissolved and redirected, at the judge's order, into a community legal defense fund for homeowners wrongfully targeted by HOAs across the county. And my cabin? Still standing. Still mine. But now it has solar panels on the roof, a handcrafted bench carved by Miguel, and a little plaque by the trailhead that says, "No tyrants beyond this point." Tourists love it. Locals chuckle. And every time I walk past it, I remember what it cost me to carve out that freedom. One last twist. Karen tried to file for early release citing emotional distress and dietary restrictions. May attended the hearing just for fun. When Karen spotted her across the courtroom, she burst into tears and muttered, "She's haunting me." The judge denied the request. I guess justice doesn't care for low-carb excuses. To anyone reading this, if you've ever felt small, bullied, or boxed in by someone hiding behind rules they invented, remember this. The law doesn't belong to tyrants. It belongs to all of us. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply open your front door and say no. Now I ask you, was I right to fight back? Or should I have just paid the fine and walked away? Tell me what you would have done.